All right, it is noon time, so love to get started. Obviously, people will trickle in as we're on the webinar today, but definitely want to be respectful of everybody's time and get started here right at noon. Thank you for those of you that have joined. Really appreciate you spending the next hour with us, and really hope that you find a lot of value in today's session. The theme obviously was around Valentine's Day and finding your perfect match. So really kind of comparing similarities of dating and how that translates to business. So we had some fun with this. Hopefully you enjoy and appreciate this as well. But really, as we know, those of us that have been in business for any length of time now, really a lot of the client prospecting and really trying to earn trust and value in relationships with our prospects is built around providing value, right? So it's not about a one-way conversation. It's about really getting to know the other person and building trust and building that relationship. So that's really what today's session was all about. Really leading the conversation be Cassie and myself. Just a little bit about my background. I've been in business for about 20 years now, and really most of my time has been spent on the sales and marketing side. So really helping with content creation, helping to attract ideal customers, how that translates to funnel management, pipeline management, and then ultimately that alignment between sales and marketing teams, ultimately helping to close those deals. So I've really been on the front lines with a lot of those strategies around that content creation and really building those relationships with prospects and converting those to customers. And then Cassie's with us today as well. Spent a lot of time putting together today's session and pulling a lot of the content together for today. Cassie's our Director of Marketing Strategy at IMG. And Cassie, if you want to say a quick hello before we dive in a little bit more as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been with IMG for just about 3 years now, have over 5 years of experience in the digital marketing space. As Gil said, I spend a lot of time in content, developing strategy around different channels. And again, I'm really value focused. So super excited to put this together. And Gil, I'm sure it was on your list, but I want to shout out Kristen Darcy too. She put together all these slides today. So really excited to show everyone.
We share the recordings with her just so she can hear that we give her a shout. And just a couple of housekeeping items as well. So we have the chat open, so feel free to ask questions. We will monitor the chat as we're going through. If there are questions related to the topic that we're on, we'll answer them, as we're going through. If there are questions that would be more served for later in the conversation or maybe post webinar, we'll answer those as well. But definitely, we will get to all your questions. I think, in previous webinars, we've always made sure to address every question that's been in the chat. So we'll continue to do that. So again, feel free to put messages in the chat, anything that comes up along the way.
All right, thanks, Gil. Okay, so I can go ahead and kick things off. As Gil mentioned, building a funnel is a lot like online dating. And I have a quick example here. So let's say you meet a match online. Maybe you find them on Tinder, Bumble. Something about this person drew you to them and you agree that you should meet up and let's meet face to face. But what if that person after your first date proposed? Odds are very likely that you're going to get pretty freaked out and say no, and it's a little too fast. Same thing can happen in your sales cycle. You don't want to ask for the sale right at the point of your first meeting. You want to take the time to get to know someone. So just like dating, you want to date, meet the family, go on several trips together, maybe spend a few years really getting to know each other. Then you're much more likely to actually see success. And if someone proposes to you, you're much more likely to say yes. All goes the same when it comes to your marketing and sales process. You want to take the time to provide that value to your leads in order to get them to say that yes. So Gil, I'll pass it over to you to go through a quick outline. You are muted, by the way.
Thank you. Had to happen at least once today. So on today's webinar, a few things we want to make sure that we're covering for you and providing that value. So what is a funnel, and then ultimately why track leads? So we're going to talk through the process of utilizing or managing a sales funnel, and then why you should be tracking your leads. We're going to go on a tour of the funnel. So really, what are the different aspects and stages of a funnel? We're going to talk about defining marketing versus sales qualified leads. What are the differentiators? And again, why we should be identifying or labeling those prospects. And then we're going to talk through some optimization as well. So really, when we first start with what is a funnel, the funnel is really that journey, right? So when we think of start to finish, where do we first engage with our prospect? Where do we find them, right? Is it, is it a cold list that we found somewhere? Is it an old prospect? Are we running ad campaigns to find people, or are we just putting out content to try to engage people that are finding us online? So really, the funnel is from the very start of that relationship. Again, where did we meet? Did we meet in the grocery store? Did we meet online, right? So it's really that first step of that initial engagement on any level. And then the other end of the funnel is really the customer and the relationship post-sale. So really what we're going to identify is what are all the stages and steps within that funnel, and then ultimately what are the different strategies that can be used during that courtship or that process. Then ultimately, why use a funnel? So funnels are really there to attract that perfect client, the ideal match. And just like, again, using that dating reference, you don't know where you're going to meet somebody. You don't know where you're going to find your ideal client. So just being very singular, focused on one channel creates a challenge. The omni-channel approach of being in multiple places, email, social, paid ads, that's really going to open you up to more opportunities. So using a funnel is going to allow us to test and try different approaches, and then ultimately qualify those leads. So we're going to see some people kind of drop off, they're not the right fit. And then others will continue to engage throughout the funnel, throughout the life cycle, and we'll know that there's a fit there. And then really it provides a predictable way to scale our business, meaning that once we find a proven way, a proven method that works for us, we can continue to use that funnel and make adjustments as needed. But ultimately what we're trying to find is something that allows us to really build something that provides scalable results for our business, which obviously the more predictable our revenue is, the better that is for planning, for staffing, and really helping to grow and scale our business. So when we look at the various stages, right, first we look at the awareness stage. So some of these stages will align to marketing, others will align more to sales. But first we have that awareness stage, right? That is when people just initially identify us in any way. They see a piece of content on social, that's creating awareness. They stumble across our blog, they see our ad when they're on a different website. Maybe we're doing some retargeting where our banner ad shows up. Maybe somebody just mentions us to them, so maybe it's a referral. But first, it's that awareness stage. So again, the idea of you're in the market and you just glance over and see somebody, you don't know anything about them, right? But you're creating that awareness initially. And ultimately, repeat awareness is going to lead to moving someone further down the funnel or disqualifying them as not a fit. But awareness is really important. And what we're going to dive into more is how to leverage this stage to help build value. But awareness is going to be that first step. We want someone to even recognize our existence. Then we move to lead capture. So somebody's not going to give us their information. Someone's not going to give us their phone number or their email address if they really don't know much about us, if they've just kind of recognized us in some way. So the idea of lead capture is now to say, okay, someone recognizes our existence, but now we need to provide some value to them in order to capture their information. So how are we doing that? And again, Cassie will dive more into some of those strategies, but ultimately we want someone to self-identify, to give us their information saying, yes, I am interested, or at least I'm interested on some level, and then hopefully we move them further down the pipeline. From capturing a lead, then we can identify a marketing qualified lead, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but ultimately a marketing qualified lead is a lead that marketing should continue to follow up with because we've noticed some interaction, which ultimately will lead to a sales qualified lead, meaning, okay, now somebody on the sales team can actually directly have a conversation, right? So we're taking it out of marketing hands and we're moving it into more of a sales process. And ultimately, it may be the same person in smaller organizations. You may have the same people running marketing versus sales, but ultimately, we want that handoff from marketing to sales, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then big picture, we want to create customers and then keep those on as lifetime customers if possible. So when we differentiate the two, and we touched upon this a little bit, but you have your marketing funnel, which is really more about awareness and branding and content and really getting somebody to hopefully self-identify there's a level of interest. And then on the sales side, the sales funnel is more about direct outreach, direct conversation, sending out proposals and quotes, or getting somebody online to actually start adding items to their cart, right? So, the differentiator here, and there's a fine line, but the differentiator is that marketing is really trying to create the awareness and vet out the good versus the not so good, or qualified versus unqualified prospects. Sales is really taking over with all the qualified prospects. And it's an important differentiator, because we don't want to spend time on the sales side if people aren't really engaged or the right fit. So it's really important to have that handoff. So when we talk about knowing your audience, so before you map out a funnel, you want to know who your ideal client is, right? So who are we targeting? And why this is important is because we need to understand who we're looking for and who might be looking for us, right? So ultimately, if we're putting out ads, or if we're putting out content and it's the wrong subject, the wrong topic, we're reaching the wrong demographic, whether that's age, geography, industry, or some other identifiers that we're using. If we don't understand who our prospects are, we're not going to properly put out the content that's really going to be relevant and helpful for them. So really, we want to start identifying some questions to help us when we're putting together the content. So, what is the pain point of our client, or our potential client, right? What is it that we're trying to solve? As we know those pain points, we're creating content specifically to address those pain points, because people are online searching for that. So really, we want to make sure that we're addressing what their pain point is, but we need to know that. We need to ask our current customers those questions rather than guess or hope we know. We want to identify what value that you can provide as well. So I understand the pain point. What value am I providing to that client to help solve that pain point, right? So ultimately, I understand their pain. I understand how I can solve that. And then ultimately, what's going to motivate them, right? What would make them make a decision to work with us? So there may be lots of solutions to their problem. We need to identify why our solution is better or different than others. So it's really important to make sure at this stage that we're identifying not only how we can help, but how what we do is differentiated from others in the space. And really, again, the idea behind this is the content we're creating, whether it's blogs or social content or paid ads, the content we're creating is going to be specifically geared towards that audience, which we essentially, you'll see a note here about a buyer persona. A persona is really all the aspects that make up the individual we're targeting. So an example persona would be, I'm looking for, male or female. In some cases, it doesn't matter, but we're looking for a specific gender. We're looking for a specific age group. We're looking for someone that has a certain net worth, maybe lives in a certain area. We take all those factors and we build a persona off of that. So the idea behind a persona is that we're creating this ideal customer profile, and there can be multiple. There's not just one persona, but all of our content should be specific to a persona. And then we create different content for additional personas as well. And we will follow up with some information on how to create those personas. That's one of the follow-ups on our end from today's webinar, but it is really important to identify that. You will want to look at your customers, the profile of those customers, and develop those personas to really properly create that content. And before I pass it off to Cass, just one more thing I wanted to cover here. So MQL versus SQL, we talked about it a little bit on a previous slide, but really we do want to differentiate when a prospect is in that MQL stage, they're marketing qualified, meaning that they are engaging with content, they're showing interest, but they haven't quite raised their hand yet, right? So we know they're interested based on the actions they're taking because we're tracking their interactions, right? But they haven't said, hey, I'm interested. Can someone please reach out to me? So this is where we want to continue to feed them with relevant content. And really what happens is at some point, one of three things will happen. Either they drop off entirely, right? So they're not interested. And even though they were a marketing qualified lead, maybe we never get them to the sales qualified lead stage. Or they raise their hand and say, hey guys, reach out to me, I'm interested. They fill out a form, they email us, they somehow engage with our content to let us know they're interested. Or the sales team looks at these prospects and says, okay, this person has interacted with our website multiple times, they're downloading certain types of content, they've liked or commented on our social content, I'm going to take the initiative and reach out to them. So again, a lot like dating, some people are going to come up to us and say, ready to meet, and here's my phone number. Other people need us to really kind of prompt that conversation. So really, we want to make sure that we're listening and looking for those signs in case we do have to reach out to them. In a perfect scenario, they're raising their hand first. But really, what some real world examples are, even in our last webinar, we had people that have been on our email list for years. And after the last webinar, we had a few people reach out directly and say, hey, now I'm interested in having a conversation around how you can help my business. It took years of putting content out to get to that point. And you don't always know what that one piece of content will be that will convert an MQL to an SQL. But by consistently putting out different types of content, there typically becomes one piece of content that just strikes a chord or resonates. And that happened with our last webinar that we hosted. So it is all about consistency. It's about, again, listening to your audience, but ultimately we want to feed our sales pipeline with qualified leads. And we do that by continuing to put out great content. So Cass, I will turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks for that. So we'll start at the top of the funnel with building awareness. So as Gil mentioned earlier, awareness is really your lead's first interaction with your brand. There's a dozen different ways that a lead can find you online or in print ads or even just through word of mouth. But it's important to remember that the more people that you have in this awareness stage within your funnel, the more likely you are to convert customers down the line. Because there are people who will eventually fall out of your funnel and you may just not be a fit for them, even though they have come across you online. So we want to make an effort to just keep this area really full. So I have a few tactics listed here that may be used to build awareness for your brand. So social media, this can be through organic or paid ads. And social, obviously we have several platforms to choose from, but it's really important to be testing the type of content that you're releasing through any of these platforms, because as Gil mentioned, you never know what that one piece is that's really going to convert that lead and make that decision for them that they're ready to move on to the next step. You may have leads come across your website, so it's really important to make sure your site is SEO optimized so that it's easy to find on search. You may have blogs. When you're creating blogs, do make that effort to make those SEO optimized as well, so they're much more likely to come across and solve that problem that your lead may have. So remember that buyer persona we're creating, create blogs around those specific topics where we can solve problems for our clients. Search engine marketing, so we can use paid on search engines, to drive traffic directly to our site. So I want to reiterate that SEO is a bit of a longer game. It can take some time to bring traffic to your site. By using paid SEM, you can drive traffic to your site immediately. Same with paid social. Of course, building a presence organically through social media can take time. Of course, you can go viral, but that's few and far between. So you can kind of cut the line by using paid social. There's two types of paid ads that I want to touch on. I think it's important here. So when you're creating an ad primarily on LinkedIn and or Facebook, you can have the option to use a traffic ad or a lead gen ad. So traffic is typically used to drive to a landing page or a page on your site where you want a prospect to take action, where a native lead gen form will have a prospect fill out a form right within the social platform itself. So typically we do see higher conversion rates on those lead gen forms because it's native to the platform. So I did just want to comment on that. And as we move down the funnel, awareness is that first step where the leads can get to know us, see us online, maybe see us in person. Lead capture is when we're actually getting that information. So getting that phone number, gathering that email address. I did just see a question pop up. These slides will be available for download. Okay, so our lead has some awareness around us. Now we really want to make sure we're capturing that lead. So as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to rush to the sale. It's very unlikely that you'll have a Facebook ad out there and you're going to get a sale immediately from there. We want to use what's called a lead magnet to really draw in our lead, capture their information, and then put them into our funnel for further nurturing. So there's a lot of different lead magnets that we can use. But again, I just want to reiterate that we want to be providing value with any of these lead magnets. So let's talk about the technology piece first. We mentioned native forms within social where a prospect could fill out their information and receive a follow-up email right away. You could also use landing pages to drive a lead to a page on your site, have them gather a little more information about what you're offering, and then have them fill out a simple form where they can then retrieve that offer. So you want to utilize forms on your landing pages, and I do have some tips for both landing pages and forms coming up. Another really fun piece could be an exit intent pop-up, and I'm sure everyone's seen those on websites. When you go to exit the website, something will pop up asking you, hey, do you want 10% off? Would you like to sign up for our newsletter? Are you interested in learning more about us? Or what can we do to provide value for you? You simply put in your email address and then you're put into a sequence to receive that coupon or get more info through newsletters in the future. So those are a really easy way to kind of capture that website traffic that's already there and have a lead take further action by giving their information to you. Just want to review a few lead magnet examples. So I'm sure everyone's seen the white paper or case study example where you head over to a website, you can fill out a form and then you'll receive that white paper. Some other examples would be guides, ebooks, webinars. So right now everyone either came into this webinar today through an email that we sent out or through a Facebook ad. You can provide video tutorials or demos, and these are really great because you can save time and not have your sales team going on calls where it might not be for a qualified lead. The lead can take the time to watch the demo themselves. You can have tracking in place to see if a lead actually interacts with that demo. And again, be tracking their activity, building their score up to then convert them to a sales qualified lead. And we can talk about that a little more too. Of course, newsletters, if you've attended any of our webinars, we do have one specifically on email marketing that we can share. We talk a lot about providing ongoing value for both new leads and existing clients through monthly or biweekly newsletters. You can provide downloadable templates for anything that may be relevant to your product or service. You can provide a free audit or consultation or a free trial of your product if it's viable there. A few tips for your lead magnet. Again, providing value is one of the most important things here, but we want to also create content that's relevant to our audience. So as we said, buyer personas. We might not only have one specific person that would fit all of our leads. Maybe there's several different variations of our buyer persona. If that's the case, we want to have content for each type of buyer persona. So keep that handy when you're creating that content. And I always reference, and we talk about this internally with our team, we should be referencing back to that buyer persona very frequently to make sure that we're checking all of the boxes for our leads. Another really great tip here, if you have a popular piece of content on your website, let's say there's a blog that gets a lot of traffic, is there a piece of content that you can gate right on that page? So the example would be buyer personas, right? You go online to read more about how do I build a buyer persona? That web page may have a form to say, download your free guide to getting started today. That's a great way to just get that lead and provide the instant value. This screenshot here shows a pop-up on a website for instant value. So as I went to exit this website, I was prompted to fill out this form to get more value from the website right away, or from the brand right away. And a few tips for landing pages. So these are really important. This is one that we see a lot. Oftentimes, people will be driving to a landing page that has a lot of options on it. So options meaning there's a navigation menu at the top that can prompt someone to go searching for something else on your site. It's really important to keep your prospects focused. So you want to remove multiple call to actions from your site and keep the objective of the landing page to do one action. So that might be to fill out a form or click a button. So we want to remove everything else that would eliminate a prospect from completing that one goal. Another thing you can do to increase conversions would be utilizing video. And of course, whenever you're having videos on a page, try to have them autoplay when possible. When it comes to a form, make sure you're asking the right questions, not every question. This is important because the more questions you ask, the less likely it is a lead will actually complete that form and you'll get the conversion. Remember that we have extra time within the marketing and sales funnel to gather more information about our leads. This is just to get the basics so that we can contact them and continue to have that conversation. So fields that I typically will always require is first name, last name, email. If applicable, you might need a phone number or a company name. to have a smarter conversation down the line. And as we were talking about earlier, it's important to have multiple landing pages if it makes sense for your multiple audiences. Content isn't one size fits all. You want to make sure that you're writing to that specific audience and creating pages for your specific audiences. And then this goes across all types of content, but specifically on landing pages, make sure that you are optimizing for mobile, not just desktop. Here are a few landing page tools that you can use. And one of the questions I've heard several times is, do I have to build my landing page on my existing website? For example, if you're hosting or you built your website on WordPress, you do not have to build your landing page through WordPress. Unbounce, ClickFunnels, Lead Pages, Instapage, these are all tools that are very user-friendly. You don't necessarily have to have a web background to be able to utilize these pages. They're very marketing friendly, drag and drop, and easy to use. I want to touch on some of the associated costs with lead capture. So there's your cost per lead, and then there's a cost per acquisition. And I want to note that these are very different. So your cost per lead is designed to be at the top of your funnel. So these are getting people into the top. This is where you want to be spending the most in order to grow the likelihood that you close clients further down. The cost per acquisition is your marketing and sales spend combined. So this isn't just getting that email or phone number, it's actually closing the sale. So I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that they're very different. And when we're talking about the marketing funnel, we want to focus our efforts on cost per lead rather than cost per acquisition. So if you're looking to scale your cost per lead or will allow more leads into your funnel, we want to reduce our costs. So the easiest way to do that is through testing. So you can test your copy, have A/B variations at minimum for every ad that you run. Same with emails, you can have variations on your blogs. Display time. So if you're running ads or producing organic social content, when are you putting that content out? You can recycle some old content that was previously used and try and put it out at a different time and see if you get a better reaction from your audience. You can test your creative, so the actual visuals that are used on your ads, static versus video, GIFs, what colors work better. These are all things that are very testable and allow you to actually recycle content just by making very minimal changes. The last bucket here would be targeting. So who are you actually showing these to? So let's say you're running Facebook ads. Facebook and LinkedIn both have great targeting options. You can create many different buckets and test to see where you have the cheapest cost per lead so that we can continue to really scale that funnel. All right, so Gil's talked quite a bit about the marketing qualified leads versus sales qualified leads. I do just want to talk about MQLs a little bit more and talk about what we can show them and how we can nurture to them. So just reiterating, what is a marketing qualified lead? This is a lead who has already interacted with your brand's content. They're not quite ready to get on the phone with a sales rep, but they do need to be shown more value from your brand. How long will a lead stay in the MQL stage versus the SQL stage? There's several factors that can play into this. And as Gil mentioned, sometimes it can take years in one stage before a lead is ready to move on to an SQL stage. Typically, the more costly your product or service is, the more time that a lead will need to spend in the MQL stage. But again, just remember that length of journey will vary on a case-by-case basis. So how are we continuing to provide value for people in the MQL stage? We can email them. You can provide articles. You can provide industry updates. It's important just to stay in touch through nurturing. And I'll kind of skip ahead to my last bullet here. It's vital to have a multi-channel approach. So we don't want to put all of our efforts into email marketing. Yes, should leads hear from you at least once a month? 100%. But should they also see you on social media? Maybe see display ads in their feed and receive LinkedIn conversations from you? Yes. So that's the best way to build that multi-channel approach for your brand. How do you scale this? It's right. If you have a lot of people in your awareness stage, so trickling down to MQLs, you might not be able to handle this manually. This is when you can utilize automation through an email service provider. So again, referencing that email webinar, we talk a lot about that. Internally, we use Pardot to automate our email sequences, but there are several tools that will allow you to do this. And a strong, robust email service provider will also allow you to have personalized outreach based off of information in your CRM. So you can include first name, last name, what position they have at that company without having to manually type that in. You can use tags to personalize that outreach for you. And again, keeping that info relevant to the recipient. So going back to your buyer persona, what problem can I solve and what content am I providing that reiterates that our brand can solve that problem for you? And with that, Gil, I will pass it back to you to talk about the bottom of the funnel.
Thank you, Cassie. So we will talk about sales funnels. One thing I just want to touch on that Cassie mentioned, and really want to make sure that we really take this away as an important point. You know, multi-touch approach, different channels, absolutely imperative, and really focusing on doing it for a long period of time. You know, what I've heard throughout my career in this space is, I ran a couple of Facebook ads, they didn't work. I've sent out some emails, no one responded. And really, you have to make sure you're giving it time, and time is different for everybody. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, could be 2 years. You know, it's the type of initiative where, because we're reaching a larger audience, just because we didn't connect with people that have been on our list for years, maybe the newer people are resonating with that message. So, you know, really make sure to be consistent with that. And again, try different channels, try different messaging, different subject lines, different calls to action. Make sure you're mixing that up, and don't just think because you tried Facebook ads once and Facebook ads don't work, or Google ads or email. Giving up on any channel because it didn't produce the results you wanted in a short period of time really could be that you didn't do it long enough, or that there was an issue with messaging, subjects, calls to action. So I cannot stress enough that it really is about doing something consistently, knowing that as long as you're in front of the right audience, it will work. It's just a matter of adjusting as needed and giving it the right amount of time. So as we talk about sales funnels, so if marketing does its job, right, there's this, in the industry, there's this constant struggle between sales and marketing. And again, some of us are on both sides, so you know, we don't have as much of that internal conflict, but we see a lot of marketing teams saying, well, we're passing lots of leads on to sales, but they're not closing them. Sales teams saying, well, we're getting a lot of leads, but they're not qualified enough, right? So this is something we hear constantly. So this alignment between sales and marketing is absolutely imperative. And it's not about what you didn't do right, or the leads aren't the right quality, or you didn't send enough messages. It's about being on the same page. And again, if we're doing both sides of this ourselves, it's a little easier in some way. But when you have a marketing team and you're in sales, or you have a sales team and you're in marketing, you really need to be aligned on your goals. You need to be aligned on the messaging and the approach, and respect the role that that department plays in the process, because it is about working together to make this work. You know, neither side is more important than the other. Both sides are equally as important. Sales tends to feel like, well, I closed the deal, I'm more important because I realized the revenue. But again, the argument can be made that if marketing didn't build brand awareness and really position the company in the right way, that sale would not have closed. So this is a really important step in getting from marketing to sales. And, you know, we're transitioning slides from marketing to sales. It's the same thing. It's really transitioning within the team from marketing to sales. So ultimately, we're looking for sales qualified leads. And again, not to continue to repeat the same message here, but a sales qualified lead means that either they've expressed interest without raising their hand because they've done a lot of things that we identify as sales activities, or they are raising their hand saying, hey, I want you to reach out to me. That's the easy stuff, right? That's the low hanging fruit. Everybody in sales wants somebody raising their hand saying, reach out to me. But ultimately, that'll be the minority of what we're going to see. The majority of what we'll see are people that are, you know, for example, if we're selling something online, maybe they're adding items to the cart or viewing products on the site, but not buying, right? So they're taking a buying behavior, but they're not actually completing the purchase. If it's more of a B2B scenario, it would be an example of somebody downloading a white paper on, what CRM they should be using or how to best optimize their CRM. We would know if somebody is downloading a white paper on CRM optimization that they would most likely need help from our team to help them customize their CRM, for example, or they're downloading a white paper or reading blogs around marketing strategy. So, if we look at it and say somebody accessed the email webinar we hosted, end of last year to really learn how to optimize their email marketing, that now for us would become a sales qualified lead, right? They're taking an action to download and read content on a specific topic that our company helps businesses with. That for us would become a sales qualified lead. So in that scenario, a few different things could happen. Somebody could start the conversation. There's some examples here of, hey, are you interested in this service? Are our services the right fit? Is the timing right? Are you the right person to reach out to? So these are some conversation starters that'll happen direct. So we're not using Facebook ads for this. We're not using content on our website. We're sending an email directly to that decision maker or that person, or we're picking up the phone and calling them because we have all the data and information in front of us to determine that they're showing some buying behavior. Some other identifiers are scoring. So if you have a system like a Pardot or a HubSpot or a Marketo, they provide a score, and that score basically tracks all digital engagement. So you'll know if somebody is clicking on social links to go to your website, they're reading blog articles, they're opening your emails, that's going to accumulate a score. And internally, you could say, okay, if the score is greater than X, 20, 50, whatever the number is, I now want sales to reach out to them. So marketing has done its job. It's built up a score with the prospect by putting out good content. Now the handoff to sales needs to happen, right? So that's another example of where we can track through marketing initiatives and activity and hand that off to sales in a much more qualified way. Other lead behavior as outlined here, if someone fills out a form, low-hanging fruit, that's the easy one. If they're opening emails, that may or may not be a buying behavior. If they're doing it consistently, then we could argue that's a buying behavior. But if someone just opens a few emails, reaching out to them with a sales pitch, probably not the right time. If they're attending webinars, sure, they're interested in the topic, they're investing time. So, obviously there's people on today's webinar that we know really well, and that's great. And we, value the fact that you're investing the time with us. There's also people on here we don't know, and there's a reason you're here. So we'd like to think if there was a fit where we could help, we want to be that decision, that vendor of choice for you. So ultimately, we want to look at these interactions with people that are investing time, absorbing, and really spending time with our content, that there is a fit for sales. And again, sales will now take over that relationship and do some direct outreach. And then just some tips. So again, we touched upon these a little bit, but aligning the sales and marketing teams. So sales should know what content marketing is putting out. What you don't want to have happen is the sales team have no idea what types of content marketing is using to engage the audience. We need to know the content that's being put out by our team. And then ultimately, we want to reference those pieces of content during the sales cycle. So we want to make sure that we're talking about, hey, I noticed you attended our webinar. I noticed you downloaded the white paper. What did you think of it? Are there anything in there that resonated with you specifically? And let's talk about that. So it's a much easier conversation to have. Don't toss the nose. So just because someone says that I'm interested now doesn't mean they'll never be interested. And I think just, right place, right time, that's really important. So unless somebody says, remove me from your list, I'm not interested, I'm never going to be interested, those people, obviously, we don't want to continue to reach out to, but a no now doesn't mean no never, right? So we really want to differentiate a no now versus a no never, and make sure that the no nows end up in their own little subset of a list that we can reach out to at some point. And then consider your competition. So when somebody is at this point in the sales cycle, that they're potentially also at that same point with others in your space. So this is a really good time to be aware of the fact that they're probably having pricing conversations or value proposition conversations with others in the space. And we want to make sure that we're aware of that, so that as we're positioning ourselves at this point, we're really identifying, where we fit in and where we're a better fit than others in the space. And when we talk about, speed to follow up, you're much more likely to close a sale being the first one to get in front of somebody. So there's studies that show these are 9 times more likely to convert if you follow up within 5 minutes. What I've always found historically is that if somebody fills out your form on a website, they're probably filling out 3 to 5 forms, on other sites. And the first person to respond is typically the person that will earn that business. Some people never respond, but the first person to respond has a much more likely chance of closing that business. And then we talk about customers. So now we've spent the time, marketing has done its job to get a prospect to us. Sales has done its job of closing the business. Now we're at that customer stage. So really, and I know a lot of you have probably heard this before, but it's a lot less expensive to retain and grow an existing client than it is to find new clients. We always want to find new clients, or most of us want to find new clients, but there's so much untapped opportunity with existing clients and customers that we really want to make sure that we're doing a good job of staying in front of our audience. So first, it's about delivery. We have to deliver the products or services that they came to us for in a way that's really effective. That is absolutely a necessity. If we can't do that, then there is no long-term relationship. If we are able to do that, now we're actually, again, building that relationship continuously and making sure that we're identifying other areas we can help our clients. So when you think of businesses that offer more than one service or repeat service, if we're not asking clients to come back to us for those other services, we're really not taking full advantage of that relationship, right? So ultimately, we want to make sure that whether it's marketing, putting out content specifically to customers, or it's the sales team reaching out, just making sure that we're addressing all of those needs, we always want to focus on the customer to see, where they can come back to us for more. So if it's, if we're in the lending space, somebody borrowed money at one point, well, guess what? They're probably going to want to borrow money again for something else. If we're in a financial space, they've invested money, maybe they have other accounts they want to invest, or they have referrals of people they could send to us for investing. If you're on the B2B side, if you're offering multiple products, again, cross-selling those opportunities are really important. So making sure we continue to offer those products and services to customers. And, really it's the, all the touches we have along the way, we want to make sure that we continue that post-sale. So when we look at brand advocacy, this is where we're going to make sure that not only are we staying in front of the audience, but we want to ask them for feedback. We want to ask for referrals. These are two things that we see a lot of times clients are not doing, right? So our clients aren't always asking for feedback. They're not always asking for referrals. One of the things that we've done that's been really effective is that, we're picking certain projects that fit a profile that we're really trying to target as a business and asking those clients for reviews or feedback for internal purpose. That's really powerful. So asking for that feedback, you're very likely to get it. Good or bad, you want that feedback. If there's issues with the process, asking for feedback gives somebody a chance to give you that really helpful information to make adjustments. And if everything's great, it gives you the chance to not only get a review that you can share with others, but it's also a great time to ask for referrals. If I've done a great job for you, we're working together, and I ask you to refer me to somebody else, there's a much more likelihood that would happen. Referrals tend to come when you ask for them, right? But if you just hope that they're going to come in just because you did a good job, it's less likely. So being more forward thinking and asking for those referrals is really important. And then to that last point here, which we touched on, just stay in touch. So marketing doesn't end, sales doesn't end once you deliver that product. Really, you want to make sure you're staying in front of that audience because, as it states here, acquiring a new customer costs 5 times more than retaining an existing customer. We really want to take our good customers and grow our client base within those clients.
Right. Gil, I'll jump in here and share a quick use case. So this is a use case that we typically will see for service-based clients. So top of the funnel would be building awareness through a social ad. So remember, when we're building that awareness and trying to ask for that lead, asking for that information, we're not just asking for it right away, we're providing value in exchange. So the common example is the white paper. So the landing page for the white paper download for the lead capture is very simple. Again, there's no navigation. We have a simple form with a very direct call to action. So there's no opportunity for our lead to get lost, get distracted, and not convert. Once we gather that information, that becomes a marketing qualified lead. That lead is automatically added to our email service provider and our CRM. So as that lead is now in its marketing qualified stage, as we start to nurture through email and other channels, they're going to build up that score. So keep that in mind. That lead is falling into the automated email sequence. We're sharing value like blogs, driving them to our YouTube videos, and sharing personalized content here. Upon hitting a certain score, so if we're using Pardot as the example here, every action that they take within that funnel is going to bring up their Pardot score. Once they reach that threshold, we'll qualify them as a sales qualified lead. So again, how do we build up that score? It could be opening emails and clicking on links within the email that can indicate that they're taking actions on these certain pieces of content that makes me believe that they would be qualified for a sales conversation. Once they reach that threshold, we can use automation to notify our sales team that they need to reach out to this lead. Now we enter a manual sales process. So something I want to touch on here, there could be an issue in miscommunication, especially if we're using score-driven indicators to move from an MQL to an SQL. It might not be the right time. So if that's the case, and if sales determined it's not the right time, you can always drop that lead back into email nurturing until it is the right time, until they raise their hand and say, okay, now I'm ready, or reach out in some other way. So don't be afraid. Again, don't drop those no's, just put them back into your funnel until they're ready to further engage with you. So great, now they have a great conversation with sales, a couple of touch points, they're ready to convert into a customer. We have a new client. Again, touching on our retention, we want to provide value past that point of sale. Typically, we do that with distribution of a monthly newsletter. Everyone's invited to our webinars and invited to continue to engage with our brand and further build that trust, even past the point of us providing our service. Gil, anything to add on an example here?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that, again, from an example standpoint, it's really about that focused content. You keep touching upon it, but it's about making sure that we know exactly who the audience is at that time, because the more customized that content is, the more custom that call to action is, the more likely they are to convert. So, just to kind of, I hate to repeat the same thing, but it is so important that we're really focused on specific content for that channel, for that audience. And even if it means splitting our audiences into smaller lists because they have more specific needs, then absolutely we should do that, because that's what's going to ultimately drive more of those common or more conversions for those audiences.
Gil, I'll pass it back to you to discuss scaling.
Yeah. So in order to scale and really manage our funnel, we're not going to know how it's working unless we're tracking, right? And this is something, again, we see as a challenge very often. Clients will say, well, I'm doing a bunch of stuff and I'm closing some deals, but there's a gap between the stuff and the deals. So really we want to track conversion rates, right? We want to make sure that we know how many people we've reached out to, what our total audience size is, and how many conversions we've had from that audience to get our conversion rate. So a typical conversion rate we see is somewhere in the 3 to 5% range. Again, that's not going to work will be the same for every industry. But if you're in the 3 to 5% conversion range, that's a typical number we would see. Now, what that conversion means is different for everybody. So we look at that as like a form fill or a content download. So if we're sending out emails to 1,000 people and 300 people open the email, right? To me, that's kind of my identifiable audience for the people that are actually seeing it. And then I'm expecting a 3 to 5% conversion from the people that are actually seeing the content. I personally don't count the 1,000 in my funnel for that example because 700 people aren't really seeing the email, so they're not an addressable audience in that scenario. So I'm looking at, again, if it's email as the example, how many people are seeing it, how many people are filling out a form to download content or request information. Same thing with social. If you're running a social ad or a different type of ad, it's how many people are we serving the ad to, and then the percentage of people that are actually taking the action that we've intended. Same thing would happen with blogs. If somebody's going to a blog page and there's a form to request information, I want to see how many people are going to the page and then how many people are requesting more information. So ultimately our conversion rate is whatever our call to action is, whether it's buy a product, contact us, or download some information, that's our conversion rate. So it's that addressable audience, it's the conversions divided by the addressable audience, essentially. Really important to know. If we're seeing conversion rates on some content 8-9% and others 1-2%, we want to spend more time on the 8-9% or see why we're not converting as high on some of the other content. So, that addresses number 2. As far as improving sales funnel efficiency, if we're seeing gaps, we want to make adjustments, but we won't know what those gaps are unless we're tracking our conversion rates. And then if we're seeing high conversion rates, now let's increase the number of leads in the funnel, because ultimately it'd be great if we're getting a high conversion rate, but if we don't have a lot of leads and we keep feeding our funnel with high qualified leads, now we can essentially see how we're going to scale this. So back to Cassie's point earlier about scaling what's working, filling more leads in the funnel is definitely going to help if we have a proven method of converting. And then scaling your ROI, right? So however much time we're investing or money we're investing, that'll also scale as we're optimizing and identifying the best way to manage our content and our messaging, and then continue to add leads to that funnel. Cass, I'll pass it back to you to take it home.
Sure thing. So just a quick recap, we've gone over all of the stages of the funnel. What is identified as marketing, what's identified as sales, and how we convert leads between marketing and sales. So a few do's and don'ts. Do customize your funnel to meet your customers' needs. There might be multiple funnels depending on how many buyer personas you have. So don't be afraid to have multiple channels here. To Gil's point, do track your results. There's no scaling involved if we're not measuring what we're doing to start. So make sure you're tracking everything and really seeing what's the most successful and double down on that. Don't set it and forget it. Funnels are kind of living, breathing things. Your content may need to evolve as industry news changes or just as your customers' needs changes. Especially in the world we live in right now, it's very important to make sure that your content is timely. So do go back and check some content that you may have thought was evergreen a few years ago. It might need an update now. And don't give up too quickly. Like we've said a few times, some of these sales cycles might be very short. You might build awareness and then close just a few days or weeks later, where others may take years. So be sure to test, try different channels, try different types of content, and don't give up. So a few tips to kind of get started immediately. So I want to stress that most of the people on our call today have most of these pieces in place already. It's just a matter of organizing your content that exists and really putting together the strategy around it. So take out a pen and paper, build that buyer persona. Like Gil said, we'll be following up with some tips this week on really how to build that best buyer persona. Find your lead magnets. Do you have existing content that you can use? Can you leverage old blogs? Do you have white papers, case studies? If not, start to decide what you're going to create. Like Gil said, do we have reviews that we can use for case studies, or should we start reaching out to our best clients? Building landing pages. If you don't have the team, like a web team at your disposal, remember that there are tools that are very marketing user friendly, very drag and drop. So start building those pages and then creating the nurture content. So what's your plan for once you get this lead? The last thing we want to do is have just the top of our funnel defined and no plan for once we actually capture that information. So take out the pen and paper and really draw this out. It's great to do it with a team and try and collaborate as you go. But again, you have a lot of the pieces in place already. It's just a matter of organizing all of that info. Remember, this might take a lot of time to build upfront, but these funnels are designed to be scalable. So once you really find out what's working, this is when you can build it up and really scale your business utilizing funnels. Alrighty.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining. I know we even finished a few minutes early. We're getting better at this the more we do it.
I know, I'm surprised. Something is up with our slide. I did see a question about who we are. We're Integrated Media Group. Our web URL is growwithimg.com. If you do have a few moments, we appreciate if you stick on and just fill out the survey that will be popped up on the screen here. Really helps us build value in these continued webinars. And yeah, again, thanks so much. If you have any questions, be sure to follow up. We'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.